Welcome to the 308th meeting of the New York Comics and Picture Story Symposium. This is a weekly lecture series about comics, illustration, animation, and the history of text image work. We're sponsored in part by the Will and Ann Eisner Family Foundation. Our guests tonight have just woken up. They're both calling in from Singapore, and we're here to celebrate the publication of Weng Pixin's new book from Drawn and Quarterly called Sweet Time and Other Stories. Weng Pixin works across a wide range of forms, from painting to drawing to making comics to sewing and making constructions using found objects. She's part of Chicks on Comics, a comics collective based in Buenos Aires, Argentina, and she also facilitates art workshops for children and adults. And Weng will be discussing her work tonight with Lim Cheng Tju. He's an educator based in Singapore who writes about history and popular culture. His articles have appeared in the Southeast Asian Journal of Social Science, the Journal of Popular Culture, and Print Quarterly. And he writes comics. He does lots of things. Weng Pixin's talk tonight is entitled From Zines to Graphic Novels. So take it away, and then we'll have a discussion and some Q&A at the end.
Yep. Hi. Good evening, everyone. I just want to say good morning because it's morning for us. Singapore is about 12 hours ahead of New York right now. So it's 7 a.m. on a Wednesday morning for us, for me and Pixin. So good evening and good morning. Okay, so thanks, Ben, for the introduction. So maybe I'll just do a very brief one to sort of put things in context. Because Pixin is actually very prolific. So while, yes, we are here to talk about Sweet Time, which is her first book with Drawn and Quarterly that came out last year. Her second book and her latest book has just been out. It's called Let's Not Talk Anymore, also published by Drawn and Quarterly. So I think both books will be available in all good bookshops in New York and Singapore. So other than being very prolific, and it is really because Pixin has been doing this for a very long time. For more than 10 years, I've known her for more than 10 years. She used to run a shop selling her handmade crafts, her zines, her posters, your knickknacks. I'll leave it to her to talk more about that. It was a very interesting shop. And really, to me, she's an embodiment of DIY ethos and spirit in Singapore comics, all right? She's really doing it on her own without any state support. And I think, to me, what's of significance is that she is the first Singaporean or comic artist from Singapore to be published by Drawn and Quarterly. Of course, I think many of us here have read comics by Fantagraphics, Drawn and Quarterly, or actually working with them. But I think it's no mean feat, right? That we have someone from Singapore published by Drawn and Quarterly. And actually, I'll be interested to talk to Pixin about that, right? How did that come about? All right, how did a Canadian comics company show interest in a Singapore comic artist? Is it a function of technology, of how the world has become smaller? All right, in the past, it was much more difficult. So having said that, I think maybe not many audience are familiar with Pixin's work yet. So I've asked her to prepare a short presentation where she can show us some of the images. I mean, comics being a visual medium, we should see more than we talk. All right, so Pixin, take it away.
Thank you both for the introduction. I'm going to try to wing it for this presentation.
Is that a pun?
No, not at all. Okay, so I guess I just pulled together a couple of images, I think, to show how like I started from zines and how that continued to getting a book published, which is, to be very frank, which is still kind of surreal when I think about it, because as Cheng Tju mentioned, I've not been um, state funded. Although to be fair, it's also because I've not applied for any funding in the locals arts council. Um, and the reason for that is because I've just heard from so many friends of mine who tried to apply for the grants, and a lot of them tell me that it's just a very overwhelmingly tedious process where you are having to explain a lot of what you're going to do. And for a lot of artists, it's not knowing what's the outcome that's often the fun of making art. So the application of a grant may be for some other projects where I think, right, for like zine making projects, it just doesn't make a lot of sense. It was why I didn't really apply for funding. I just sustained myself based on my teaching and doing assorted art projects when I was working on my comics. So for a very long time when I work on comics, it was definitely not profit oriented, and it still isn't, because it's not like a job that you can easily ease into full-time career. um, but I think in the very beginning, like the kind of image that you see right now on this slide is, it reminds me of the time that I was just completely I wasn't struggling so much financially. It was not too bad because I was teaching and the art projects paid pretty okay. But I think I was struggling a lot just to find the time to make to get these stories down, because comics tend to take time. I imagine they are a little bit like animation, but of course animation might be a little bit more tedious. Um, so this page that you see now is kind of the very first comic I made. And then I got a hang of it, and now yeah, okay, I got a hang of it, and I decided that I was, um, like previously it was made in markers, so now I just would use pen and colors, and it was, I think it at this period of time was quite diary like, meaning whatever that was happening that I felt was kind of significant for me, and I just wanted to put the little details down. Um, I think I must also share that I come from an upbringing where to talk about all these is almost unwelcomed or discouraged. Talk about one's feelings. Um, so all these felt very cathartic for me at that time, and the pictures and the words that you see was um, coming from um, a place in me that have been kind of discouraged from speaking out for a very long time. Um, I don't know why. I think Asian families, and maybe a lot of different cultures as well, like a lot, a particular generation of family just doesn't quite welcome the expression of a lot of things. So the zine sort of came out of that. Yeah, and then I would just um, play around with panels, I guess, for this piece. I think soon um, I felt that, you know, in the previous, it was all kind of pen on paper or marker on paper. And I come from a painting background when I was in art college. So at some point, I decided that I really miss painting and I wanted to kind of get into it. And because time is of the essence in my life at this period of time, and I wanted to make comics and was just purely out of the love of it. I thought I wanted to kind of combine my love, what I love to do, as much as I can. So I think painting comics also came out of like sort of an efficiency mindset of wanting to try to put things that I love together so that I don't spend like a big chunk of time painting and then another chunk of time like creating comics. Why not just do the two as much as I can? But I think I didn't include the images where the painting turned out really bad. So I'm sorry. I think I also didn't keep it. So this is sharing one that was an outcome that I'm proud of. But I would say looking at it, I personally find it really cluttered and too squeezy and squashed. So so this is a period of time where I'm just also learning how to use colors and use paints. But yeah, like for example, for this, I personally now look at it and think that it looks kind of messy. But again, this is a period of time that I was pretty much just trying to get back to painting after not painting for a very long time, and then combining the love with comics. So yeah, so this was, all this time was, I think about from 2006 to 2018. So that time period was just a lot of experimenting with different ways of making comics. And that's when I decided to pitch an idea to Join and Quarterly to see, like, would you be interested to put it together into a book? So they looked at the artworks and said yes, and that's how it went. So these are just some of the stories that are in Sweet Time. They are all very short snippets of stories. They are not like from the start to finish. It's about 200 pages, so it's all like a collection of very, very short stories that I made over the period of time when I was experimenting with comics.
Sorry, Pixin. I think the audience saying is a bit soft. Maybe you can speak up a bit louder.
Sorry about that. I guess I knew. Is this better?
Yeah, this is much better.
Okay. Yeah. Oh no. Do I need to re-say what I just said?
No, it's fine. It's fine. It's much better.
Okay.
Thanks. Yeah.
All right. So oh, why did I put this in? This was actually made during our lockdown here in Singapore. Our lockdown was in April, May of 2020. And there was just like every project was on a halt, either postponed or canceled. So I got to doing what I did in the very beginning when I'm making zines, which is I just look at what's around me and I jot it down in these like painted diary forms. Kind of like comics, but not quite. Yeah. And then Sweet Time was, sorry, this is Let's Not Talk Anymore. And then this came up. This was started way before I knew that Sweet Time was going to be published. So it was about 2018 that I started working on Let's Not Talk Anymore. I think it's within the same year that I heard back from Join and Quarterly a confirmation for Sweet Time. Yeah. So Let's Not Talk Anymore it's a story based on the figures along my matrilineal line. So it's some stories about myself, my mother, my maternal grandmother, my maternal great-grandmother, and as well as an imaginary daughter of mine. And it's a mix of fiction and non-fiction. Lots of parts, especially when it comes to my grandmother and my great-grandmother, I have no stories from them. And that was what made me want to take the time to just imagine what their lives were like. Yes, I think this is the last picture in the slideshow. And I welcome questions to speak further.
Okay, I'll start first. I saw that there's some questions from Mike, so I just answered the first one from Mike about did Pixin collected any of the COVID images? Yes, she did. She put out a zine called COVID Comics. So you can ask her more about that later on. Because I think you asked the second question about using a red pencil and all that. So okay, before that, I think I have a few general questions that I'll ask Pixin. You show that very first image, and of course, immediately what comes to mind, and because you went to art school, you know, and all that, why comics? Why not painting? Why not watercolor? Why not poetry, short stories, you know, short films, for example? So, yeah, so I'm always interested in the medium. Why comics? Yeah.
Right. I think as far as I got in my own brain, like why did I land on comics, was first of all, I think it's really from the kind of upbringing I came from. I was not encouraged to speak out a lot. It has led to, I think, when I was an art student in art college, I was a very, very quiet art student. I was quiet not only because I was shy at the time, but because I was just having a lot of difficulty forming my sentences due to just years of, in a way, years of repression or years of being told just to like keep quiet or to shut up, to just like go to your room and just don't bother me, that sort of a thing. And that really can, you know, it does a big thing to your brain, at least for mine. So for I think art college in a way was a great space to just start feeling comfortable expressing myself visually. So I had no problems like painting or sewing. But I realized that I was still not I think there's still something kind of powerful when you write the words down and when you write the thoughts down, that in my mind at the time felt like it would be sinful just to say it out, you know, that it would be shameful or embarrassing just to write the sentence out, like that I feel lonely. Like I think in the one the panel, like that I'm lonely and I want this, I'm looking for that. Like this was not encouraged in my upbringing, and it's so I think when I was going through some stuff, and I think this was like from a breakup really, and I found that I was just wanting to write it out as much as I can. And then because I was in art college and I love to draw, first of all, I mean, I even before art college, I've just loved to draw all the time. So as I was writing, the pictures just sort of came naturally to accompany the words. And again, because of the upbringing, I wasn't allowed to talk about something as simple as a heartbreak. It was like, move on, or we don't want to hear about it. What's wrong with you? Why are you crying? And then if you tell them like I broke up, and they go like, just move on, like what the hell? There's nothing, you know, like it really like becomes like, wait a minute, or is there something wrong with just feeling upset from, you know, having a heartbreak? I mean, now of course it's no problem, but back then it was just like, you're not supposed to talk about it. So I decided to write it out, and then the drawings naturally came, and I thought, I guess I should just put it together and see what happens. Yeah.
To me, actually, it's almost like a double blow, right? On one hand, we grew up not allowed to talk about our feelings. And of course, we also grew up not supposed to read comics, right? All right. So it's interesting how, in that sense, there's feelings which you're not allowed to talk about on a personal level. but actually you're also using a medium that actually is so frowned upon. Not so much now, but definitely in the 80s and yeah, definitely in the 80s, 70s and 80s in Singapore. And of course, there are periods of that similar in America, in Europe, right? Where there's a sort of an anti-comics movement. So I thought that's interesting.
I didn't know
like
that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not familiar with that. Yeah. And
yeah. So
anti-comics, why? Sorry. Yeah.
for violence, for sex, and then
okay.
Yeah. And it's bad for your brain, you turn up evil, delinquents. But specifically in Singapore, I remember in the 70s, I was told not to read comics because they contain slang. They will teach you broken English, right? That's the term we use, broken English.
I see.
Right? Not proper sentences, and no grammar whatsoever. Yeah, especially I suppose I was reading a lot of Beano and Dandy from the UK, and maybe they did use a lot of slang. But yeah, those were kind of public fears of comics. Yeah.
The Dandy, the Vino and Dandy?
Yeah, the British weeklies.
Is it a big fella with red outfit who likes to eat like a pie?
Yeah, with polka dots. I think that's Desperate Dan. I think that's the cowboy.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. That's from Dandy. Yeah, Beano had Dennis the Menace with the polka dot t-shirt.
Oh, that one. Okay. Okay, yes. That kid with the spiky hair.
Yes, and the dog Gasher. Yes, okay.
Yeah.
All right, we are going a bit off topic.
Sorry.
Yes.
Yeah.
No. These are fun memories. Yeah, but to me that's interesting. It's almost like a double blow, right? You can't talk about feelings, but interestingly, the chosen medium you use is something that's also frowned upon in that sense by society. Yeah,
I think the reason I asked you is because when I was making these comics, I wasn't aware of this part of comics history, to be honest. I didn't look at it as it was a medium that was frowned upon. But however, in art college, it was definitely a medium that was not quickly appreciated by art lecturers who perhaps come from like a very different sort of like background in their personal practice. You have the stereotypical, say, an art lecturer who loves to create abstract looking works and would favor the students who themselves make abstract looking works.
Yes.
So there was no lecturers who love comics, and even if they did, they might have like not want to be so open about it as well. Yeah. I think it's very different now, but we are talking at a time period where it's the like 2000s in Singapore art college. So people still had a little bit of what's considered high art and what's considered low art.
Highbrow, lowbrow. Yeah.
I think all art colleges go through that phase. Okay. Yeah.
Okay. The other question I'd like to follow up with, and this is really when I was discussing about this talk with you, together with Ben. And then I sort of went back to the intent of this symposium series started by Ben, right? And interestingly, it says, and it's all on the website that is, of course, it wants to talk about new ideas for distribution, all right? Explore the relationship between readers and autobiographic writers, and thinking about development of a self-sustaining comic model for such work. And of course, thinking about the traditions and future of text image work. So I'm not sure whether Ben remember writing all this, but I thought it sort of, some of these themes are quite nicely in that sense. We can even talk about it in your work, all right? Because like I said, to me, what's significance is that you are published by Drawn and Quarterly, all right? And in that sense, the first comic artist from Singapore to be in that sense published by them. And I'm always interested in the whole economics of things, right? Because really in the 70s and the 80s, it's very, very, very much like a bubble in the sense that, American comics are just publishing mostly American and maybe European comic artists. But now, again, it could be for reasons of technology where internet, you're able to send big files, high quality, high res files, right, without sending your original artwork to FedEx. and all this made global publishing possible. So I'm always interested in that. So of course, you did share with us that you just wrote into Drawn and Quarterly and they replied.
Yes. It was not, there was, to be honest, there's no mysterious path that I took. I mean, they are pretty, in a way, if you go to their website, they have a submissions email and link, and that's always helpful for like anyone who is just trying to get their works published, because you have some publishers websites where they write, okay, we are no longer taking any works, and you know, as one who was looking for a publisher, you just be like, oh man, you know, like, how do I get in here? I only have this computer to find the links and emails. So I was happy when I saw that Drawn and Quarterly just have this, like, you know, democratic process. Here's the submission link, and you know, take it or not, basically. But I think you might remember this about me, Cheng Tju, is that I have a very particularly bad memory of my own works. I sometimes don't remember when I've made them, or whether I've even made them. So that is kind of how Sweet Time came about. I was organizing my Dropbox folder, of all things. My Dropbox folder was a mess, and I thought I need to take some time to sort out the paintings, the drawings, the sewings, the, you know, different parts of my art. In my mind, before organizing my Dropbox, I had in my mind that I didn't make enough comics. Like, it would just be probably a few files here and there, and just put it in that comics folder. And what I soon realized as I was like dragging all the files and organizing them, I realized that I just kept dragging a lot of things into the comics folder. And so after that was done, and then I opened up the comics folder and I look at just the amount of work that I've done for it. And that was when I thought, okay, Pixin, I think you need to like not just sit on the work anymore. It's time to do something. And that's when I set about like preparing cover letters for different publishers. To be honest, Drawn and Quarterly was the first that I approached. There were a few others that I wrote to, that I didn't hear back from them anyways, but they replied after a year, and that was then the whole process started. Yeah, like the editing, the little knickknacks before putting the book together. Yeah. So in a way, the short story is, if I didn't organize my Dropbox folder, there wouldn't be my book published by Drawn and Quarterly, because I wouldn't remember having done so many comics. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, of course, you did share that it was very thrilling, all right, to be published by them, because I suppose you also read a lot of their books, right? Yeah, and you
then
did,
you know, when I made these zines, I wasn't reading any graphic novels at all. So it was making the zines, and some friends started coming to me and go, oh, you should check out Adrian Tolman, you should check out Chris Ware. And that was when I learned about Drawn and Quarterly. Yeah. And I started just collecting their books. Yeah, sorry to interrupt. You were saying
no, because you sort of linked me up with your editor at Drawn and Quarterly as well. And I was asking her, what made them pick you up in that sense. And of course, they say that there's alignment of what they're interested in, and they like the stories, they like the style. And this is where, again, it got me thinking, right? I mean, in general, comics readership have gone down, right? Even for your DC, Marvel, superheroes. But it seems that independent press is reaching out to publish overseas artists, all right? So it's niche, and yet, but it also has grown in that sense. Of course, the question is whether it's sustainable or not. And I suppose you have also answered that question, saying that at the end of it, you still need to sustain your living through teaching, through other means as well. So it will for now still be a passion project. All right, although the dream or vision of having published overseas is there, right? But it still doesn't mean it's big bucks, right? Yeah.
Yes.
So yeah. And
so
did you want to respond to that?
I did try to think about applying for an arts grant here to, because like you mentioned, it's like you start thinking about the economics of it. And I was thinking like, how am I gonna work on my new works when there's a pandemic going on, first of all, because that meant a lot of loss of income for me. So in a way, I was forced to reckon whether I should apply for the grant. And then when I looked at the grants that were available for the National Arts Council, I just found like it was unfortunately not helpful for the way I work, because they wanted me to not start on anything. So you're basically, in order to get a grant, you have to pitch an idea on a book that you have not worked on. And for me, I mean, when we do comics, it's just good to keep doing it. And that's for me, like I just can't take a 1 year pause to wait on a grant approval. But they told me they like my work and to just continue like submitting ideas to them. So it seems like if I want to pitch an idea, or I mean, if I want to get a grant, financial support for my work, it would have to be writing down an idea of a comic, and I cannot start on it, but then they read it and then they approve it. And that's very, very weird from the normal way that I do stuff, which is I need to work on them. So I wrote to them, I said, I already just started 10% of this new graphic novel I'm working on. Like, can't you just consider the grant money for 90% of the work? And they go like, nope, you can't start it at all. So that's frustrating. Because then it seems like the grants are much more suitable for projects that don't take a long time to plan and take shape, But I'll see now that because for us over here, we are now 80% vaccinated. There's lots of like interest to get back to living with like COVID as a part of like a normal, and so now there's more teaching stuff, there's more workshops. It's like sort of like things are starting to finally get back. So I can park the grant option aside for now because of that. Yeah.
Okay. I think this is where I'll just answer Mike's question. I saw part of your question. I think he was asking about the grants in Singapore and whether it's impacted by what happened with Charlie Chan, the Sunny Liu's Charlie Chan graphic novel. And actually, I would say the short answer to that is I think it made things a bit more strict. I think like what Pixin has just shared, they do want to see all the paperwork. They like you to start once things are approved rather than halfway. I suppose those are the inconvenience that resulted from what happened. All right, but I think if you look at Pixin, so I don't think it's controversial on that spectrum of Charlie Chan. So I don't think it's a case where it will not be approved, but it's really the SOP, the standard operating procedures, where you just need to fill up a lot of forms. Yeah. So maybe that's just to answer Mike's question. Yeah.
Yes, we look very open to the outside world, but we are still very conservative in a lot of other areas. So in the grant application itself, there's a category that just says if your work is found to be a critique of the government, if it promotes a kind of if the lifestyle, or if it promotes some ideas that we have decided as a political party that's not the thing that we want, then yes, your grant will then be taken away. But we will inform you. We'll be courteous enough to inform you that it's being taken away. Yeah, we'll give you an explanation best as we can. So it's still very conservative in that sense, especially for the arts, because we thrive on not conforming, you know, or so that's tough one.
And actually, I'm a history teacher, and of course we used to be a British colony, and the British, I think, invented, I don't know, bureaucracy or paperwork. All right, cliche. Yeah. I think in Singapore it's really just a lot of bureaucracy and paperwork. Yeah. Okay,
what was,
so maybe just one more.
CT, what was the controversy
Yes.
over Sonny Lu's book?
Okay, he did a book about the history of a political history of Singapore. So the controversy is also his representations of, or his views of history and politics. His take of history and politics in Singapore. Yeah.
Was he working under a grant, or was he working?
He was working under a grant. So when the book was published, they sort of took back the grants.
Oh.
It's a very small sum. It's Singapore dollars, $8,000, but the book was not banned. In fact, I think by de-granting him, it made him even more famous, and the book became a bestseller in Singapore and overseas as well. Yeah. That's the irony of things. Mm. Yeah, so there's no such thing as bad press.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, so maybe just one last question for me, and then I'll open it up, because I think there are a few questions on the chat box as well. Actually, so my question actually involves the rest as well, because I find that, of course, I've been reading your comics for a long time, and what I'm interested in is how does it look to others? How did it look to Drawn and Quarterly, or how did it look to even the audience here today, right? I mean, does it look international to you, or does it look Singaporean? Because obviously it's within a certain tradition of art comics, or even outsider comics, or outsider art, or within a certain strand of autobiographical, right? Mm-hmm. So I'm just wondering, and obviously that attracted Drawn and Quarterly, because your editor sort of mentioned it, and so I'm just wondering, how is it perceived by others? Yeah.
Oh my God. It's a tough one. I've no idea how it's perceived. But I think to share a little bit, I do actively try to avoid a somewhat stereotypical or common depiction of a Singaporean life. Meaning I try not to talk about food or
okay, yes, that's a favorite.
I mean, I know that the audience here is mostly from the US, but if you come over here and you see the comics or the art, there is a lot of focus on food, which is great, but it's a bit too much. It becomes like it becomes almost as if I am an alien that just visited Earth and I landed on Singapore, and all I see is just lots of visual images of food. I would just assume this culture clearly loves their food and that's about it, and that's not true. And I wanted to avoid that. Another thing I come off as avoiding, but it wasn't with intent, is that I don't usually use a lot of slang in my writings. There's a sort of a street speak in Singapore where it sounds like this, like la, le, lo, ho, like hello, yeah, and it's very casual, and it was a way of speaking that my dad discouraged heavily in the household, because he felt that it sounded rude. He felt it sounded too casual, too informal, and he was worried that we wouldn't be taken seriously. So that got knocked out of my system language wise. And so yeah, I sometimes do get quite a few questions on whether I'm local just by the way I speak. And that's not because I'm trying to be uppity or arrogant, because that can be the way I'm looked at just based on how I speak. But it was just that I wasn't encouraged to use the street style of language of communicating from my dad, especially. But I think because of that, it encouraged me when it came to like writing the comics, when it come to like focusing on getting my words down. I found that I try to be as thoughtful as I can in describing or either a sensation, a feeling, or something that I saw. I'm trying to catch what I was that my mind was sort of honing in on. Um, and I found that the street style of speaking, while it's a great language to sort of feel a what's the word, camaraderie, or feel like a connection with like the fellow Singaporeans. While I love that language because it's fun that way, I found that that language is not so helpful when you are trying to be as descriptive and in in a story. But maybe you disagree with me on this. I don't know, but that's how I've always felt. So yeah, but I don't think I can truly answer how is this work perceived by others. It makes better sense to ask like somebody who's seen it and what they make of it. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, of course, I've been reading your comics for the last 10 years, and of course, I do see there's a maturity and development, and definitely, I would say there's no intention of adopting a style for the international market, or definitely you just collected all your stories from Dropbox and you send it to Drawn and Quarterly, and happily, a good thing that they accepted it. But that's why when I ask this question, it's actually for the audience as well. For those who have read your comics and those who are looking at it for the first time, how does it come across to you? So this is where I'm opening up to the audience now. Because again, what's interesting is, I think it's unconsciously you're also tapping on to a sort of international style as well. I don't know whether that makes sense, but maybe we can hear from the audience. Yeah. Anyone like to take that up? It's a discussion now.
They are loaded. Like what?
Yeah.
I think Mike Road had some questions. I could.
Yes.
You want to?
Mike, you want to?
Sorry.
Yeah.
Try to unmute you.
What's the question? Where do I go? Is it a chat? Oh,
yeah,
okay.
there's a chat box. Yes.
So this is Mike.
Come on.
Yeah.
Hello.
So answering CT's last question, they really look more like illustration work, like you'd find in a glossy magazine to me, than necessarily sequential art. Even the New York gone back to using a lot more illustration than they used to, which is a nice change from boring stock photos. So that was the one question that CT asked. My questions were, let's see, do you usually draw in red pencil and then paint over it, like we're seeing on the page that CT or you have up right now? Or is that paint all the way through?
It's painted all the way through. But I started with just very light, say like a pastel pink or yellow outlines, and then it's painted with acrylic from there.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
Yeah.
And then let's see, I have one question, and then looks like Slim has a question, but I'll jump to mine next. So I've known CT and Ian Gordon, both of whom were on this for a few years, and I know Singapore is a very international city. And I was wondering what language you think in when you start your comics. Do you start in English and finish in English? Do you switch between languages?
Oh, you got cut off. Did he?
No, I think that's his question. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, that was the
okay.
answer to the question. Over.
Yeah.
Sorry, that's a U.S. Navy thing I'm doing there. Sorry about that.
Well, okay, so for me, it's just English true and true. I think in it, and it's pretty direct. I don't have to translate it in my mind. The reason for this is because I'm not so good in my mother tongue, which is Mandarin. It's a very beautiful language, but it's so difficult to learn. But yeah, I read in English, so that, if that helps. Yeah.
Okay. I did have one more question in there, which was the Drawn and Quarterly editor you worked with, since it's a small shop, and then I was wondering if they had asked you for any changes in your work.
No, they didn't. Not for any like images. The edits are very mild. It's mostly grammar edits.
Okay, maybe I'll just add on to Mike that for some of us in Singapore, our mother tongue is English. All right, despite attempts of learning, I don't know, Mandarin or Malay or Tamil, but some family grew up English speaking, so yeah, so they're stronger in English than any other languages. And as a follow-up, actually, this is a question I asked Christine as well earlier on, because when I read through, Let's Not Talk Anymore, there were some scenes. Okay, so to me, this book is a bit of a sci-fi. There's some time traveling to me, all right, because it moves from the early 20th century to post-war to the 70s and so on. And then there's a scene in the 70s where one of the mother figures got very angry and sort of curse in English. Then I sort of asked the scene, did they really curse in English? I thought they'd be cursing in Hokkien, right? But that's a stylistic choice, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I think to clarify, because I think CT's question is a good one, which is why does a character from the 70s curse in an English way as opposed to a Hokkien way, which is more of a local dialect here in Singapore, which is true. I think this was... Yeah, I think when I saw your question, I was also wondering like, hey, why didn't I write the vulgarity in more of a localized language? As far as I got when I thought about it was, first of all, if I truly tried to write in Let's Not Talk Anymore, because it was about the matrilineal figures, and the reality is they don't talk a lot in real life as well. My mom doesn't talk a lot. My grandmother talks very little. So these are like groups of women in my family that I've always found that they are fascinating because of how little they say about life, about themselves. And so it was why I started working on this book. I just wanted to imagine what life was like for them if they could speak. So then at some point it became having to make a choice. Is this going to be a purely visual book because of how little these characters would speak in real life? Or am I going to just try to put some words into them because I still want to explore a little bit on how like certain patterns of upbringing or interaction could sort of get passed along through the generations. So I think in that moment I sort of slipped. I must have, because in my mind I'm cursing in English, so I must have just put it into her mouth, which is my grandmother's mouth, that she curses in an English way, which in real life it's impossible. But I think at least I wanted to capture that she was frustrated and that then okay, yeah. But I suppose if there's a do-over, then honestly, if there's a do-over, I look at the comic, I'm proud of it, I'm happy with it, but it as an artist is always like, oh my god, I wish I could change this, change that, and all these things. But now it's in a book form. I can't do that. All I need to do is just sit with all that feelings that comes with it. Yeah.
Yeah, because I was wondering whether there was a drawn and quarterly edit, but you clarified that it was not. Yeah.
No, it's not. Yeah.
Okay.
Someone says, person in Hokkien in the chat room.
Yes, that's Ian. Okay, I think there's one last question in the chat before I open up. I think this is from Slim, I think, who might have left, but I think it's still a pertinent question and sort of linked to this. I'm wondering what kind of sources inspire the stories as you try to imagine what your grandmother's life was like. That was the question from Slim. Yeah.
The source of, okay, so partly is from my dad's side of the family. They are, my dad is a very chatty person. So to get a sense of how women of that era might have lived, especially like say women like his mother and his great grandmother, I got some stories or sense of things from him. And also I did some research, like very basic sort of internet Google research. You know, you search things like how was life like in 1890s in the southern part of China, and you know, there are some articles on it, and there are lots of pictures on farming. And to get as to sometimes want to, for me, I want to like tease out some ideas visually. So I remembered searching like, do farmers in China in the 1890s have pets? Do the children of farmers have like pets? Like I was trying to imagine what life was like as close as possible, like daily life, so that the picture isn't just like what you see now on the slide, so that the picture isn't just a person in a field like gathering crops. Like what is it like if they go back home, you know? And I remember finding this reading where somebody somebody researched into the life of farmers and wrote that children used to have pets where in the form of little insects they found in the fields. So if they find, say, a cricket or grasshopper, like little insects with like very tiny stick legs, the children will claim one as their pet by tying a little string around the insect. And and I thought, I like that detail visually, it's just so interesting. So that I included that in Let's Not Talk Anymore, the comic, which is not on this page, but I included like a little grasshopper looking character that belongs to my great grandmother. Yeah.
Okay, any questions from others? It's a small and cozy group. Any questions from Yen Fusami? Oh, there's another question from Mike. Are you hoping to do more books with Drawn and Quarterly?
Yeah. I hope so. It's yeah, I think it's more as a case of, am I able to finish the books, like my projects, yeah, without losing money or something in a tremendous way. Diary, yeah.
Yeah, actually, Pixin has self-published in a zine form her COVID comics. Yeah. So maybe we'll let you know how to get them. Any new projects that you're working on? I think that's the next question I'd like to ask.
Yes, but it's in the beginning stages, so I don't really want to say much because it's still sort of like a mess in the brain, so it's just gonna come out really clunky and cluttered, like yeah. So I best skip that.
I was saying I first heard about your matrimony line comic back in 2019. And now it's finally out 2 years later.
Yes,
you're sharing with us.
Panel, yeah.
Yes, right, SWF. Okay, there's a question from Yin. What are the markets for your book? USA, Singapore, elsewhere?
I have a feeling it's quite international for Drawn and Quarterly's reach, but maybe Cheng Tju might have a better idea. I am unfortunately not too clear on the business demographic. But my impression from Drawing It Quarterly is that it's quite international.
I mean, of course, I suppose the main market for Drawing It Quarterly would be North America, right? North America, and I mean, yeah, you have to check with them about how the sales are doing. And I suppose in Singapore, it will be only available maybe in bookshops like Kinokuniya, Who's in the Books, and bookshops here and there, right? It's not, yeah.
Yeah, I just remember once I was in a combined bookshop in Malaysia, in KL, Kuala Lumpur, and this is a funny bookshop because it was failed brands like Borders, Radio Shack, but also Starbucks. It was a combo of all three. And I found one of Ben's books there. So, which, I mean, you don't necessarily expect to find that kind of work in KL, or maybe that's in suburban KL as well. I'd gone out to a mall in the suburbs. So I was just wondering, but I guess nobody much has gone up as far as to KL lately to go into bookshops and see if their books are, or what comic books they have there. So I was just curious if there's a market, or even if the local comic stores were stocking that, or if it was just Kinokuniya, which is, in case anybody in the audience doesn't know, it's the largest bookshop in Singapore now. It's I call it quality Japanese bookstore chain, because it's in particularly good comics section in Singapore.
I think maybe in Pixin's case, I mean, of course, with regards to Drawing It Quarterly, it really depends on the distribution and of course the book buyer at individual bookshops. But I think for her, she actually herself published zines, she self-distribute, right, to various shops, Socrates and all that. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that would be more of the market that you have in mind, right? This self-published zines, handmade, so on and so forth.
Anyway, I've left my email address on the chat group if there's any questions or that I didn't answer, or
you can buy her zines from her. Any questions from the rest? Maybe Fusami, or I think, is she still there? Yeah, she is. Ben, any question from you?
Thank you. Yeah. So, did you consider self-publishing, or was that not seem like a viable option?
It wasn't, because I love working with colors, and the color printing here is incredibly expensive. Yeah, so it just was not an option to self-publish my books. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, I mean,
yeah.
So I mean, it works for some people.
Right.
And there are all these subscription models, all kinds of other models that kind of sort of follow the old idea of a subscription to a book, where you sort of pre-sell it, and then you have the money to publish it, even if it's only, I mean, the percentage that you're getting from the cover price with a publisher is so much less than you would get if you sold it directly. So for some people it works. You have to be willing, but you put out your own zines, so it's not that much more. It's not that big a leap to. I was just wondering, but no, but they're great to work with as a publisher. So they're not a typical commercial publisher. They're really amazingly careful and handle the book. They know exactly what this audience is for these books.
Yes, they are incredible people to work with. They
Yeah.
just sound so incredible, incredibly pleasant and encouraging over emails and exchanges. Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess there's still a place for a middleman in the publishing world.
And that sort of makes sense. Yeah, because if you self-publish a color book, color printed book, you're really putting quite a fair bit of money upfront. And I think that's why Pixin has been doing zines, which is easily assembled, black and white, but also very effective, right? Like dealing with your experience in COVID, during COVID. Yeah.
Thank you. COVID.
Okay, thank you. That was great.
Thank you so
I don't want to
much.
keep you up. I mean, I don't know if you can get back to sleep.
I don't think so.
No, I think we're just gonna start the day then.
Today. Okay.
Yeah, thank you so
Thank
much
you.
for this opportunity.
Oh yeah, my pleasure. So thank you. Next week, David Kunzel, the historian of early comics, should be here, and I'll look forward to that. And thank you. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Thanks.
Good night. Thanks for coming. Good night.
Bye-bye.